Hello, survivors. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comment section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Let's start the story. The silence of Outbreak Mall at 6 a.m. was something I'd grown used to over my decade as head of security. That Tuesday morning started like any other. I arrived just as the cleaning crews were finishing up, the empty corridors echoing with the hum of buffing machines and the occasional squeak of wheels on polished floors. My basement office was my sanctuary, a small space dominated by security monitors showing feeds from throughout the building. I settled in with my coffee, scanning the screens while organizing the day's paperwork. The parking lot was empty except for employee vehicles. Everything calm and ordinary, or so I thought. The first sign something was wrong came when Mark, one of our maintenance workers, stumbled into my office. His face was pale, skin glistening with sweat despite the cool air conditioning. "Hey, Mike," he mumbled, leaning heavily against the doorframe. "Not feeling so good, might need to head home." I looked up, noting the unusual pallor of his skin. "You okay? You're looking pretty rough." "Just a fever," he muttered, but something in his voice set me on edge. Before I could press further, he lurched away, movements strangely rigid. Around 8 a.m., my radio crackled. Tom, manning the main entrance, sounded tense. "Boss, you better come see this." I found him watching a small group of people hurrying across the parking lot. A middle-aged couple, a woman in medical scrubs, and two college-age kids. They weren't our usual early morning crowd, and their faces carried an urgency that made my skin crawl. "Please." The woman in scrubs spoke first, her voice trembling. "You have to let us in. Something's happening in the city. People are—" She trailed off, shaking her head. The older man stepped forward. "We saw it on our way here. Car accidents, fights breaking out, people attacking each other like animals. The hospital's overrun." My phone buzzed. A text from my sister downtown. "Stay inside. Don't let anyone close if they look sick. It's spreading fast." I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Richard, the mall's general manager, looking shaken. "Mike, have you seen the news? They're saying it's some kind of outbreak. Police are telling people to avoid populated areas." More people were approaching. A young father clutching his daughter's hand, an elderly security guard from the office building next door, a teenager on his own. Less than a dozen total, all looking terrified. Richard pulled me aside. "Let them in?" "But that's it. We need to lock this place down tight." I mobilized my small security team, just 6 of us total. We secured all secondary entrances, barricading the fire exits. Through the glass doors, I could see more people approaching, but Richard was firm. "We can't risk it. Tell them to turn back." My heart felt heavy as I watched families pleading to be let in, but we stood our ground. Better a small group we could protect than chaos. By 10 a.m., the situation outside was deteriorating. Traffic had ground to a halt on the nearby highway. Distant sirens wailed, punctuated by occasional screams. The small group of survivors gathered in the food court, sharing what information they had. The nurse, Lisa, had seen it firsthand at the hospital. Patients turning violent, attacking staff, spreading whatever this was through bites. I was checking the security feeds when movement caught my eye. Mark was back, but something was wrong. He stood motionless in a service corridor, head tilted at an odd angle. As I watched, he began walking, stumbling toward the food court, his movements jarring and wrong. The radio at my hip crackled. "Mike!" Tom's voice was urgent. "North entrance. Someone's trying to break in." The security feed showed a man throwing himself against the glass doors repeatedly, mindless of the impact. Dark fluid dripped from his mouth, his eyes vacant and cruel. A scream from the food court pulled my attention back to the other monitor. Mark had reached the survivors, and what I saw turned my blood to ice. He'd grabbed one of the college kids, teeth tearing into the boy's arm with impossible strength. I ran, drawing my service weapon as I sprinted up the stairs. The scene before me was chaos, people scattering, blood on the floor, and Mark. Mark wasn't human anymore. "Mark!" I shouted, but there was no recognition in those empty eyes as he turned toward me, face smeared with blood. I had no choice. The gunshot echoed through the mall like thunder. As Mark's body crumpled, I realized our sanctuary might become our tomb. The young man he'd bitten lay shaking on the floor, skin already taking on a sickly pallor. And outside, more figures were gathering at the doors, drawn by the sound of the shot. It was only 11 a.m., and our nightmare was just beginning. The sound of my gunshot still resonated through the vast space as Lisa, the nurse, rushed to help the bitten college student. His friend stood frozen, hands clasped over his mouth in horror. The rest of our small group had scattered among the food court tables, watching in stunned silence. "Don't touch him," I warned, but Lisa ignored me, her medical training taking over. She pressed a cloth napkin against the wound, trying to stem the bleeding. The boy's skin had taken on an ashen hue, his breathing ragged and shallow. Tom's voice crackled through my radio. "Tense and urgent. More of them gathering at the north entrance. The glass won't hold much longer." Through the security cameras, I could see the growing mass of infected pressing against the doors. Their glazed eyes and blood-stained faces testified to the horror spreading through the city. Each impact against the reinforced glass sent spiderweb cracks spreading outward. Richard appeared beside me, his earlier composure cracking. "We need to move everyone to a more secure location." He gestured toward the service corridors. "The storage area near the loading dock has metal doors we can lock." A pained gasp drew our attention back to the injured student. His body had gone rigid, fingers clawing at the tile floor. Lisa backed away slowly, recognition dawning in her eyes. "I've seen this before," she whispered. "At the hospital. It happened so fast." The boy's friend stepped forward. "Danny, come on, man, stay with me." But Danny was already gone. His eyes snapped open, now devoid of awareness, filled with that same predatory emptiness I'd seen in Mark. I raised my weapon again, but Lisa held up her hand. "Wait! There has to be another way. We can't just—" Danny lunged at her, teeth bared. I fired twice, the shots echoing off the high ceiling. This time, the sound drew immediate response from the infected outside. The pounding against the glass intensified. "Everyone move!" I commanded, gesturing toward the service corridor. "Grab whatever food you can carry, now." The survivors sprang into action. The father lifted his daughter onto his shoulders while grabbing bottles of water. The elderly security guard, whose name was Bill, helped the couple gather supplies from the nearest food stall. The teenager, who'd introduced himself as Josh, stood paralyzed until Richard grabbed his arm and pulled him along. We'd barely made it halfway down the service corridor when the sound of shattering glass echoed from the main concourse. The infected had breached the north entrance. "In here!" Richard led us through a heavy metal door marked "Employee Access Only." The storage area was vast, filled with pallets of merchandise and maintenance equipment. Metal shelving units reached toward the ceiling, creating a maze-like environment. Once everyone was inside, Bill and I slammed the door shut. The metallic clang reverberated through the space as we engaged the locks. For a moment, we all stood in silence, listening to the distant sounds of the infected spreading through the mall. Lisa broke the quiet, her voice barely above a whisper. "Those people, they're not just sick. This is something else entirely." The father, clutching his daughter close, spoke up. "My wife. She's a virologist at the CDC. She called this morning, warning me to get Emily out of the city. Said they'd never seen anything like it. The infection spreads through bites, turns people in minutes." "Why didn't you tell us this before?" Richard demanded. "Would you have believed me? That the dead were walking?" A crash from somewhere in the mall interrupted their argument. The infected were methodically destroying everything in their path, searching for prey. I took stock of our group. 9 survivors, including myself. Limited ammunition. Enough food and water for maybe a day if we rationed carefully. The storage area was secure for now, but we couldn't stay here indefinitely. The teenage boy Josh sat against a pallet of boxes, hugging his knees. "My phone's dead," he muttered. "Can't reach my parents. Can't even check the news." The older couple held each other, whispering quietly. Bill checked the locks again, his experienced eyes evaluating our defenses. Lisa organized our meager medical supplies, though we all knew they'd be useless against bites. Emily, the young girl, tugged at her father's sleeve. "Daddy, I'm scared." Her voice trembled, but she was trying to be brave. He pulled her closer, murmuring reassurances none of us believed. Richard paced restlessly, his dress shoes clicking against the concrete floor. The sound made me nervous. Every noise could attract attention. I pulled him aside, keeping my voice low. "We need a plan. The loading dock has roll-up doors. If we could get a vehicle." A distant scream cut through the air, followed by the sound of breaking glass. Someone else had found their way into the mall, only to discover they weren't alone. The infected operated on pure instinct, drawn to sound and movement like moths to flame. They had no intelligence, no ability to plan or think, just a primal drive to attack anything alive. Their relentless pounding at the entrance wasn't coordination, just mindless persistence. But even mindless persistence could eventually find us. Lisa approached me, her scrubs still stained with Danny's blood. "I need to tell you something," she whispered. "At the hospital before everything went dark, they were talking about symptoms, changes in the infected. They don't just bite, they hunt." The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting dancing shadows through the storage racks. Each flicker sent a wave of tension through our group. We all knew what darkness would mean in this situation. Emily's father joined our huddle, introducing himself properly as James. "I have an idea," he said quietly, "but you're not going to like it." James laid out his plan in hushed tones. "The storage area connects to a maintenance stairwell that leads to the roof. From up there, we might spot military activity, maybe even signal for help." I nodded, remembering the layout from my security rounds. "There's also roof access to the mall's ventilation system. We could use that to reach different sections of the building safely." "We need supplies," Richard interjected. "Food, water, proper weapons. Everything useful is still out there." He gestured toward the locked door, beyond which we could hear the occasional thud and moan of the infected. Lisa organized our meager resources on a metal table: 3 bottles of water, some wrapped sandwiches from the food court, and a small first aid kit. It wouldn't last long. "The sporting goods store," Bill suggested, his security experience showing. "Baseball bats, camping gear, maybe even hunting knives. Better than facing those things empty-handed." I checked my ammunition, 5 rounds left, not enough for what we needed to do. "The pharmacy too," I added. "Medicine, bandages, anything we can carry." Richard pulled out the mall's blueprint from a filing cabinet, spreading it across the table. "If we use the ventilation system, we can access both stores without crossing the main concourse." Young Emily peered at the blueprint, her small finger tracing the paths. "Like secret tunnels?" The hint of excitement in her voice was a stark contrast to our grim situation. "We'll need to split up," I said, knowing how dangerous that would be. "One team gets supplies, the other secures the roof access and checks for rescue signals." The group fell silent, the reality of separating settling in. Josh, still shaken from losing his friend, spoke up. "How do we know help is even coming?" "The military has emergency protocols," James explained. "My wife said they were mobilizing when she called. They'll establish safe zones, start evacuations, we just need to hold out." Bill examined the blueprint closer. "The ventilation shafts are narrow. We'll need our smallest people for the supply run." Josh and Lisa volunteered immediately. Despite her scrubs being stained with blood, Lisa's hands were steady. The trauma nurse had seen worse, she said. "I'll lead the roof team," I decided. "James, you and Emily come with me. Bill, you and Richard stay here and secure our fallback position." The couple. I turned to them, realizing I still didn't know their names. "Robert and Anne," the woman supplied softly. "You'll help guard the base. If anything goes wrong, we'll need a safe place to retreat." We used the remaining daylight filtering through high windows to prepare. Bill found some maintenance tools we could use as weapons: hammers, wrenches, a crowbar. We tested our radios, making sure we could communicate between teams. Lisa studied the blueprints, memorizing the path through the ventilation system. The shaft leads directly above the sporting goods store. We can drop in through a ceiling panel. Remember, I warned, the infected react to sound. Once you're in position, assess the situation before making any moves. If there are too many, fall back immediately. The ventilation access was halfway up the maintenance stairwell. Josh and Lisa would enter there, while my team continued to the roof. We found some rope in the maintenance supplies, crucial if we needed to create an emergency exit. James hugged Emily tight before we left. "Stay close to Mike," he whispered. "Do exactly what he says." The girl nodded, her earlier excitement replaced by determination. At the storage room door, we listened intently. The infected's movements had grown sporadic, periods of silence broken by sudden thuds and dragging sounds. They weren't hunting systematically, they were simply reacting to whatever stimuli caught their attention. "Ready?" I asked, gripping my weapon. The others nodded, clutching their makeshift weapons. We moved silently into the stairwell, our footsteps echoing despite our best efforts. Every sound made us freeze, listening for any response from the infected. Halfway up, Josh and Lisa prepared to enter the ventilation shaft. "Good luck," Lisa whispered as Josh helped her remove the access panel. The shaft looked impossibly small, but they managed to squeeze inside. The metal groaned slightly under their weight as they disappeared into the darkness. My team continued upward. The roof access door was heavy steel, its hinges protesting as we pushed it open. Bright sunlight momentarily blinded us after the dim interior. The roof stretched out before us, a flat expanse broken by ventilation units and satellite dishes. The view of the city stopped us cold. Smoke rose from multiple locations. The streets were clogged with abandoned vehicles. In the distance, we could hear sporadic gunfire. Emily pointed toward the horizon. "Look!" A military helicopter was making slow circles over the downtown area, too far to signal. James pulled out his phone again, desperate for a signal. Nothing. The networks were completely down. We established the observation post behind an air conditioning unit, using some old tarps for shade. From here, we could watch for rescue while monitoring the parking lot below. The infected wandered aimlessly there, drawn occasionally by distant sounds. My radio crackled. "Mike?" Lisa's voice was barely a whisper. "We're above the sporting goods store. There are infected inside, but they're not moving much, just standing there until something catches their attention. How many? 3, maybe 4. We can see camping supplies, weapons, everything we need, but we'll have to be fast." I considered our options. Wait for my signal. If we create a distraction, a deep rumble cut through the air. Another helicopter. But this one was closer, moving erratically. Smoke trailed from its tail as it lurched through the sky. "It's going to crash," James breathed, pulling Emily back from the edge. The helicopter spun wildly, its rotors screaming as it descended. For a moment, it seemed like it might clear the mall entirely. Then the tail caught one of the satellite dishes, sending the aircraft into a sickening spiral. The impact shook the entire building. Metal screamed against concrete as the helicopter skidded across the roof, finally coming to rest near the opposite edge. Fuel leaked from its ruptured tanks, creating dark pools that reflected the afternoon sun. Below, the infected reacted to the crash, their moans growing louder as they were drawn to the noise. Through my radio, I could hear the others calling, asking what happened. The helicopter's door burst open. The pilot crawled out, his uniform soaked in blood. He managed a few steps before collapsing. "Help him," Emily cried, but James held her back. I approached cautiously, weapon ready. The pilot looked up, his eyes clear and alert despite his injuries. No sign of infection. Don't move," he gasped. "Fuel could blow." The radio crackled again. "Mike?" Lisa's voice was urgent now. "The infected are going crazy down here. The noise, they're all heading toward the roof access points." I looked at James and Emily, then at the injured pilot, the spreading fuel, and the only exit door. We had seconds to make a decision that could mean life or death for everyone. Acrid aviation fuel permeated the air as James and I reached the injured pilot. The wreckage of his helicopter lay twisted behind us, metal groaning as it cooled. Emily kept watch by the ventilation unit, her small fingers gripping the concrete barrier as she monitored the roof access door. The pilot's flight suit was shredded, blood seeping through multiple tears in the fabric. His breathing came in shallow gasps, each intake causing him visible pain. The rooftop stretched out around us, a concrete expanse now marred by debris and leaking fuel. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the scene, making it difficult to gauge distances in the alternating patches of light and darkness. From our position, I could see smoke rising from various points across the city, some close enough to make out the flames, others just dark smudges against the horizon. "Base lost contact," the pilot managed, struggling to stay conscious. His eyes darted between us, trying to focus. "Cities quarantined. Military protocol." Each word seemed to drain what little strength he had left. The fingers of his right hand kept twitching toward a tear in his flight suit, as if trying to reach something. The radio at my hip sparked with Lisa's voice, the static making her words sound distant and hollow. "The infected are packing the stairwell. Heading up. I count at least 15, maybe more. They're moving faster than before. The noise must have excited them." A heavy bang against the access door punctuated her warning, the sound echoing across the roof. The metal barrier shuddered as bodies pressed against it from the other side, the frame groaning under the increasing pressure. Rust flakes scattered from the hinges with each impact. James pulled Emily behind a ventilation unit, while I helped the pilot to nearby cover. The girl's face was pale but composed. She hadn't made a sound since the crash. Her father kept one hand on her shoulder, his other gripping a length of pipe we'd brought from the storage room. Even now, I could see him calculating angles, looking for escape routes. The city spread out below us, a maze of streets and buildings that had transformed from familiar territory into hostile ground in just a few hours. Cars sat abandoned at odd angles, their doors hanging open. The parking lot below was littered with debris and dark shapes I tried not to study too closely. "The 9 survivors?" the pilot asked, his eyes glazing with pain. His hand finally found what it had been searching for, a flare gun tucked into his flight suit. He pulled it out with trembling fingers, pressing it into my hands. The metal was warm from his body heat, the grip smooth and professional. This wasn't some basic emergency flare, it was military grade. I studied the spreading fuel, then looked at the door straining against its hinges. The dark liquid had created a wide pool between us and the door, spreading in thin rivulets toward where the infected would emerge. An idea formed, terrible but necessary. If we timed it right, we could use the helicopter's leaking fuel to our advantage. Through the radio, I could hear fragments of conversation from the storage room. The others were arguing about whether to try reaching us. Richard's voice cut through, reminding them of protocol. Maintain position unless ordered otherwise. At least someone was keeping their head clear. "James," I called softly, calculating distances in my mind. "Get back to the stairwell, the way we came. Take Emily, I'll be right behind you." I didn't need to explain further. James had been reading my intentions since I took the flare gun. Military background, I guessed. Noting his efficient movement and tactical awareness, he understood immediately, lifting Emily onto his shoulders in a practiced motion. They stayed low, moving from cover to cover behind the ventilation units toward our entry point. The girl remained silent, her eyes wide but alert, one hand gripping her father's hair for balance. Metal screamed as the access door finally gave way, bursting open with enough force to dent the wall behind it. Infected spilled onto the roof like a dark tide, their vacant eyes scanning the space before them. The helicopter's bulk temporarily blocked their direct path, buying us precious seconds. Their movements were purely instinctual now. No strategy, no coordination, just primal drive pulling them toward any sign of life. "You have to leave me," the pilot whispered, his voice barely audible over the approaching moans. Blood had soaked through his flight suit, creating a growing dark patch beneath him. His injuries were too severe. We'd never get him down the stairs. The look in his eyes told me he'd already accepted this truth. More infected pushed through the doorway, shoving and stumbling over each other in their mindless advance. The first wave reached the fuel, their shuffling feet creating ripples in the dark liquid that spread in expanding circles. The afternoon sun caught the movement, making it look almost beautiful in a grotesque way. I adjusted my grip on the flare gun, its weight reassuring despite its crude purpose. James and Emily had reached the stairwell. I could see them in the shadows of the doorway, waiting. The infected moved closer, passing the helicopter's wreckage. Their blank faces caught the sunlight, revealing details I wished I couldn't see. "Your name?" I said quietly to the pilot, knowing these would be his last moments. "For your family." "David Martinez," he managed, a ghost of pride crossing his pain-lined face. "Phoenix Base. Tell them, I did my duty." His eyes cleared briefly, meeting mine with surprising intensity. Then he nodded just once and closed them. The flare gun raised smoothly in my hands as I sighted along its barrel. The infected were fully committed now, spreading out across the fuel-soaked roof in their relentless advance. I aimed high, calculating the arc that would land the flare in the densest concentration of fuel and bodies. The phosphorus round cut through the air with a sharp hiss, its crimson trail reflecting in pools of fuel below. Time seemed to stretch as I watched it fall, everything moving with dreamlike slowness. The world erupted in a flash of orange and white. A wall of flames engulfed the infected, their bodies disappearing in the inferno. The blast knocked me backward, the heat searing even through my clothes. Through the roar of flames, I caught a final glimpse of David Martinez, his face peaceful as the conflagration claimed him. I scrambled to the stairwell where James waited with Emily. The heavy door clanged shut behind us, muffling the chaos above. We descended quickly, our footsteps echoing in the confined space. The metal stairs vibrated with each step, the sound making me wince despite knowing most threats had been eliminated above. "The others," Emily whispered as we reached our floor, her first words since the crash. "Will they be okay?" Her face was smudged with soot, but her eyes were clear and focused. Static burst from my radio, making us all jump. Richard's voice barely cut through the interference. "What happened up there?" "The whole building shook." "Roof's compromised," I replied, leading our group back toward the storage room. "Most of the infected were caught in the blast. We're heading back." I didn't mention David. There would be time for that later, if we survived. James touched my shoulder, pointing upward. Through the high windows, multiple helicopters passed overhead. Not rescue craft, but heavily armed gunships. Their dark profiles cut across the sky in formation, headed toward the city center. The military had arrived, but their presence felt more like a threat than salvation. The sharp percussion of rotors filled the air as more aircraft joined the formation. Whatever was coming, we needed to find the others fast. Our window of opportunity was closing. We reached the storage room to find it in chaos. The explosion had shaken loose shelves of merchandise, creating a maze of fallen boxes and scattered supplies. Lisa and Josh had returned safely, but the tension was palpable. "Military's mobilizing," Richard said, pointing to his phone. "Last message I got said they're planning to sanitize infected zones." "Sanitize?" Anne asked, clutching Robert's hand. "They're going to bomb the hot spots," James cut in, his military experience evident. "Standard containment protocol. We need to get clear of this building." Bill was already gathering supplies into backpacks. Food, water, anything we could carry. The pharmacy run had failed, but we'd have to make do with what we had. Through the windows, we could see more gunships circling the area. The sound of distant explosions rolled across the city like thunder. "The service tunnel," I suggested, remembering the mall's layout. "It connects to the underground parking garage. From there, we might have a shot at reaching the perimeter." Richard shook his head. "The tunnel flooded last month. Maintenance never fixed it." A massive explosion rocked the building, closer this time. The military was moving methodically through the sectors, leaving nothing to chance. "The loading dock," Lisa said suddenly. "There's a delivery truck still parked there. I saw it when we first arrived." It was risky. The dock doors were loud, and any surviving infected would be drawn to the sound. But with bombs falling closer by the minute, we had no choice. We moved as one unit through the service corridors, everyone carrying what they could. Emily stayed between James and me, while Bill and Richard took point. The others followed closely, trying to minimize noise. The loading dock was clear when we reached it. The delivery truck sat exactly where Lisa had seen it, its back doors slightly open. Keys hung in the ignition. The driver must have abandoned it when everything started. Josh checked the cargo area. It's empty. We can all fit. Another explosion lit up the sky, close enough to rattle the windows. Fire bloomed on the horizon. They're getting closer, James warned. Minutes at most. I took the driver's seat while the others climbed in back. The engine started on the first try, a small miracle. As I backed the truck up to the ramp, Bill hit the dock door control. The metal door groaned as it rolled up. The parking lot was mostly clear. The infected had either been drawn to the roof explosion or wandered away. We accelerated toward the exit, passing abandoned cars and debris. A gunship roared overhead, so close we could see the missiles under its wings. The pilot either didn't spot us or chose to ignore the single moving vehicle fleeing the target zone. We cleared the parking lot just as the first missiles struck them all. The blast wave hit us like a physical force, but the truck stayed on course. In the rearview mirror, I watched our temporary sanctuary disappear in flames. "Where now?" Lisa asked from the back. "West," James replied, "away from population centers. The military will focus on urban areas first." As we drove through the burning city, I thought about David Martinez, who sacrificed himself so we could escape, about the others who didn't make it, about how quickly everything had changed. The gunships continued their grim work behind us, but their sounds grew fainter as we put distance between us and the destruction. 9 survivors in a delivery truck, heading into uncertainty. But we were alive, and together. For now, that would have to be enough. The city burned in our rearview mirror as we drove toward the setting sun. The first 12 hours of the outbreak had culled millions. The next 12 would determine if humanity survived at all. But that's another story.